Wow. I thought there would be just a few people here. Nothing else to do in Little Rock tonight? Well, thanks for coming. I appreciate it. How many people here have seen The Cove? About half. And how many people heard about it and said, well, that's not the kind of movie I'd want to see? Don't be shy. You're not going to embarrass me. That's all right. I just, a lot of people don't. It's like I feel like it's the best movie nobody saw. It's just incredible that he can work so hard, but that's encouraging. There's half the audience sees a documentary because most people don't see it. We're sort of the poor stepchild of movies. It's like I'm not sure who sees Academy or who sees films these days and documentaries except the choir. And what I try to do is make films that I don't know. When I made The Cove, I thought, well, who's going to want to see this film besides a few dolphin lovers? And it's, I think we surprised ourselves that it has the legs that it does. Last month, we lit up the Empire State Building for 3 days red. The owner of the Empire State Building, Tony Malkin, had seen the film, and he said, what can I do to help you guys? Can we use the building somehow? So for 3 days, they lit it up red and called attention to it, made news over in Japan, which is really important. But today, we don't have that long to talk, so I'm just going to run you real quickly through my previous career, which I thought, I was a photographer for National Geographic. I was the first guy they hired in about 11 years. They hired me right out of school, and I thought I had the best job in the world. And I hope I'm teaching, this should be a lesson to the kids in this audience because I wasn't dreaming big enough. As a career, it was wonderful. I felt I had a really great run, but I never dreamt that it could be a better life than the one I was living. And it was just my lack of imagination that was suffering. Because when you can spend 90 minutes with a person in a room showing your vision, and this has happened all over the world. Where I've probably been to 35 film festivals from Abu Dhabi to all over Europe to Sundance, and to have 90 minutes with people and have them laughing and cheering and then crying and then asking what they could do to help afterwards. It's the thing that's like, it's the best thing in the world to be able to use the vision and the storytelling experience I've learned over the last 35 years and actually change people's lives. When you make a Hollywood film, I always think of this like a roller coaster ride. Generally speaking, you're starting at point A and you basically come back to point A. But you take a documentary like The Cove, and I think people are changed. They come out of it completely, feeling something different. Is this on? Can you hear me? We set out to make a film that was going to change the way people not just thought about dolphins, but they thought about the way they ate. They thought about animals for entertainment. They started thinking about the oceans differently. They started thinking, it does that to people. Tens of thousands of kids have written to us from all around the world, and they want to get involved not in just this issue. We've had millions of people try to help us solve this issue, but they get involved in environmentalism. They want to get involved in political action of some sort. They want to get involved in biology, and it's like we actually set out to make a film. I set out to make a film, and we did this in my backyard. I have a studio in my backyard, my house is in the front, and that was my commute when I was working on the film. And I thought, there's one thing I definitely wanted to do is I want people to think. I want them to get out of a movie and say, you're definitely going to land on planet B somewhere. You're not going to be the same person that you set out with when you sat down in that darkened room and the lights went down. And that happens, when the people I know, the people I associate that make documentaries, they really are changing the world. I call it a weapon of mass construction, making a film. You drop a bomb, you kill people, and you don't really change them. But you make a film and you create allies, you create legions of allies, millions of allies. But I'm just going to start you out real quickly with the path how I got to make The Cove. So. I'm just going to show you about 30 slides from the years at Geographic. People say, well, boy, I'd love to work for National Geographic, you know, just go around with my camera and take beautiful pictures. Well, this is my average assignment. Can we darken the lights a little bit? Is that easy to do, or is that difficult? Should have went over this beforehand. Oh, that's good. Yeah, and this is, I think, 42 cases, 6 carry-ons. I had 1 assistant. And those are sky caps. We were lucky. But, you know, this is, you're going from Mongolia to China to Patagonia. And I remember at the airport where we shot this picture, that was $11,700 to get this is back, you know, 20-some years ago, just to get the baggage on the plane. But that was what I was doing, a story on the Mesozoic, the midlife of the planet. And so I could go into, this is the Senckenberg Museum. I just, you know, you could drop, with those bags is, you know, half an acre of black velvet, and I'd light it, you know, set up scaffolding, shoot dinosaurs looking more like jewelry than like you'd expect you know, a regular dinosaur. This is kind of hard to tell what it is, but it's actually a baby dinosaur inside of an egg. It's like one of the first ones they ever found, an embryo dinosaur before it was hatched. And you can see that right where the hand is, that's a head, and then it's sort of curled around like a fetus. That was named after me. It's called Baby Louie. It's a baby Chinese T-Rex. This is what it looks like when it was. That was the cover of National Geographic. That's cute, isn't it? But you don't want to feed it when it gets big. A lot of the stories, you know, this is a real dinosaur egg that we put in with a bunch of chickens. We just want to get the reaction. A lot of what I do is I try to make pictures that are arresting or interesting or humorous, and so it gets people thinking. So we were trying to think, well, you know, a lot of what you do when you shoot dinosaurs, if you saw that previous picture of the Brachiosaurus-looking thing, that, you know, the long nail, the sauropod, if you saw that without the human skeleton there, you wouldn't have any reference to size at all. So I'm always thinking, like, how do you show scale? This is a duck-billed dinosaur skull, so we put ducks in there. This is in Russia. This is in the Andes Mountains. These are dinosaur tracks that had faulted up vertically, and this is in a uranium mine. This is the first story I did for National Geographic. This is how I became the first person that worked for them in 11 years. I proposed a story on garbage, and they said, okay, well, you got the job. And then I went back home. I was so excited, I realized that I've got to make garbage look good. For the next 9 months, I was traveling around in garbage. But, you know, it taught me that you can make something out of anything. You know, my idea there was that, you know, garbage is, you know, in some countries, like in the Philippines, is valuable, so valuable that they guard it with the military, so people don't sell it for more money outside the dump. In America, we just throw back when I did this story, I was into garbage way before it was popular. It was there was only two communities with recycling when I proposed this story. There was some Mountain View, California, and then there was a test community in New York somewhere. But it was this is actually on a garbage barge going by the Statue of Liberty. Back then they didn't cover it with anything. It was going to Fresh Kills landfill over New Jersey. The follow-up to that story, I did a story on the sense of smell. And this is for Geographic, and it became one of my most famous pictures. I was thinking, you know, there's all this stuff that they have, like for foot deodorant and kitty litter and stuff. There must be somebody that tests this. And there's like 2 groups of people that do independent testing for, like, Procter & Gamble and Lever Brothers and all these people that use smell. And there's these women that's their job. There's about half a dozen women, and they go, like, smell armpits. Every morning they have, like, a series of guys. Like, there's a control with deodorant and then without, and then they. Somebody was showing me something last week. My pictures get stolen a lot, and somebody was trying to sell me an infrared camera in LA just 2 days ago, and he had this in his PowerPoint presentation, and I was like, "You didn't pay for that, did you?" A story on sleep. You're getting the idea. I don't do the normal stories for Geographic. I know you had Chris Johns here, who was a friend of mine when he was a photographer at National Geographic. Now he runs the place. But, you know, Chris does stories like on the Rift Valley and, you know, beautiful places. I do this crazy stuff like, you know, sleep and dreams. This is a narcoleptic dog. Yeah, so we just showed it food. But, you know, sleeping dreams, garbage, the sense of smell, you're getting the idea that you're not dealing with like your normal photographer here. This is a story I did in the Information Revolution for National Geographic. This is a funny story. I know we have a limited amount of time. I'll try to rush through these, but Nathan Marivold, who worked for Bill Gates, was sort of his Merlin. He's the guy that was hired to look out and see where's the future of electronics going to be in the next 5 or 10 years, so Microsoft is set up for it. And in between his office and Bill Gates' offices, they had this wall of screens. Not this one, I built it. But he said there was like 12 television sets going on. Now remember, this is back in like 1993, you know, 1994, just on the dawn of the internet era. And I said, well, what's this about? He says, well, I'm just keeping in mind that, you know, at some point we're going to have a 500 channel future. We'll be able to get 500 TV, you know, channels on your television. And back then, you know, I was born in Iowa and we had one channel. You know, and I haven't had TV in my house in 10 years now. My kids reminded me, but he said, you know, 500 channels. I thought, man, that sounds like a good picture. And I did this, and this picture has, it's probably one of the most reproduced pictures in history. It's been used everywhere for, you know, when people try to show the information revolution. And I built the room and had convinced Mitsubishi to give me 100 TVs. They wouldn't give me 500. I had to move them 5 times over the course of 3 days. It was done on 3 pieces of film, a 4x5, a 2 1/4, and a 35 that I had, like, you know, bolted down to a cement floor. But I built that room. You know, so I remember there was a producer from Germany that came over to America and says, "So where is this room?" He wanted, was like, "No, it's down." These are the creators of the internet. This is for the information revolution too. This is. They let me fake one picture at National Geographic where they, you know, because we said, part of the idea was that you can use this digital media and manipulate it to anything you want. So I always wanted to, I think it was Sir Arthur Eddington came up with that line that said, you put 100 monkeys in you put an army of monkeys in a room full of typewriters, one of them was going to produce a Shakespeare play. And then some scientists actually got together and did the experiment and said, no, they didn't. None of them even came close to a word. They like S's though. This is the guys that did Up at Pixar saw this, and that's how they came up with the idea. I think this is a guy that I photographed. I saw this in the Wall Street Journal one day, and then took off the next day to go film him. He was, you know, flying these balloons, and the way he got down is he would just cut one off and then slowly descend. This is me at the Chrysler Building putting Hasselblads over the side, three levels of Hasselblads over like a scaffolding to get a unique viewpoint. My dad fell from a fall from a building when I was 8 years old, and he died. And I'm always terrified of heights. Well, actually, I like heights. I don't like edges. This is on top of the world's tallest building in Taipei 101. This is my assistant. I'll tell this story really quickly. It's really funny because, you know, I'm terrified of heights. I was roped in when we were doing this picture, you know, and once I'm roped in, I feel pretty secure. He's up there without a security belt at one point when we were scouting it out. And in his pocket is a Leatherman. You know what a Leatherman is? Like one of those like high-tech, you know, like a Swiss Army knife, but like more robust. And he was walking around the outside of this thing without a tether on him. And I said, "Oh, come on in, Charles. You know, you're scaring the hell out of me." And there's like these sort of toilet bowl-sized, you know, this openings where you crawl through. And coming back in, you know, we had to go through 60 meters of towers to get up to the very top of the building. And I hear this metal falling on metal. And I said, "Tell me that's your Maglite falling in the building." He says, "No, that's my Leatherman. It fell outside the building." And I go, "Oh my God." And I look out there, and there's right below this round thing, there's a little foot peg. And nothing below, that's the busiest intersection in Taiwan. And this Leatherman is sitting on this foot peg like this. Now, this is 509 meters above the busiest street in Taipei, and the building is swaying like this. And it was like a bar trick. You couldn't, you know, if you did it 100 times, you couldn't have fallen. And it's like, there is a God. So I belayed him down there, and he got it. This is Bill Gates. This is for the Information Revolution story. We're illustrating how much information you could put on a CD, which at the time was about 330,000 sheets of 8.5 by 11 single-spaced type. And then now you can put it on about 3 or 4 times that. But I put the these are two stacks of paper that we put holes through, put a aircraft cable through a ferro bolt at the bottom with a steel plate, and then we sort of levitated above the forest behind Microsoft with a crane. And so I don't do, you know, like the simple pictures. This is it cost about $100,000 to do this one shot. Then after Geographic, I went to work for Fortune magazine, where I made a living taking pictures of people that make too much money. So this is Michael Eisner, the head of Disney. That's Roy Disney, and he's actually sitting up there. And I remember I did this shot, then the next day I was photographing him and Lucas over, they're opening up some Indiana Jones themed ride at Disneyland. And Lucas said, "You put the most valuable stockholder of Disney up on the roof." He said, "Why don't you do it digitally?" Michael Jordan, this is the most popular cover in the magazine's history, Fortune magazine. I think it had less to do with me than him. This is Pixar. This is Steve Jobs at Pixar before they did Toy Story. And you know, we saw, I took my kid, it's the only time I took my kid to work, and because it was a really playful place. They had scooters and swings from the animation, you know, place where they had all the animators were. And I thought, you know, I see my kid scooting down the hallway with John Lasseter, and you know, he runs Pixar. And I thought, boy, he's going to think this is the way every business is run. And I said, after, like, he was about 6 years old at the time, I said, well, what'd you think of that? And he goes, it was all right. I only put this in because this is the last portrait that was done of him. Bentonville, right? Yeah, and we went down there and he didn't want to be photographed, but then the writer who became the head of Fortune said, well, we're not going to let Louie go until he gets a picture of you. And it ended up being the cover and the last picture taken of him. So it was the cover of his book, Made in America. This is Roger Smith, the head of General Motors. And this is sort of going to bring us back full circle. This is Jim Clark. He's the guy that started Netscape. It's the first way that most of us got on the internet back in the mid-90s. And this is, at the time, it was the world's tallest mast. It was 192 feet. Remember, I hate edges. So they just put the stick in. It's not even secured. And I went up to the top, and I slid down the forestay, and I took this picture. But we ended up, you know, hanging out that night. This is in Amsterdam. And we found out we're both divers. We love the oceans. And, you know, at this point, he's about 55 years old, and he's going to be traveling around the world in his boat, and he has no place to, you know, no buddies all his buddies are working. And I'm sort of like, I want to call me semi-retired, but I have a lot of free time. I can do anything I want because I wasn't, you know, I was freelance. So we became dive buddies, and we traveled all over the world, you know, doing pictures. And Jim, at one point, Jim turned to me and said, you know, I really want to learn how to be a good photographer. And I said, Jim, I'll teach you how to be a great photographer if you teach me how to be a billionaire. So we went around for about the next couple of years, and I taught him photography, and you know, he picked me up on his plane, and we'd, you know, go off to Cambodia or to the you know, Four Corners area of Utah here. That's Jim at Vermilion Cliffs, and that's the boat he built that we went off on. And he let me take it on the first expedition, and so I'll get around to that later, but this at that point, this is the world's largest private sailing yacht, and that was our launch vehicle. That was our mothership for about 2 or 3 years while we were filming. It wasn't a bad life. This is in Rangiroa in Polynesia, swirling barracuda. It's a whale shark off of Galapagos. But the third time that Jim and I went to the Galapagos, we were noticing less and less fish every time you go there. You know, at the same time of year, it's not an El Nino year, there's no reason for it. And we were looking around, we noticed that the fishermen that were there were illegally long-lining in a marine sanctuary. And, you know, they're finning sharks, they're getting, you know, they're basically vacuuming out the wildlife. And Jim said, somebody should do something about it. And remember, Jim is a guy that helped send man to the moon. You know, when he was in college, he sped up the computers that, you know, made good on JFK's promise to put man on the moon by the end of the decade. That was Jim. He starts Netscape, the way we first got on the internet. The day he quits that, he starts well, I take that back. He started Silicon Graphics first. This is the first 3D graphics engine. It's the way that you can, design. Everything's designed now on technology that Jim developed. The day he quits that, he starts Netscape, the $3 billion company. He said he did just to prove that the first two weren't a fluke. But I used that WebMD to save my mom's life about 4 or 5 years ago when I found out that the doctors were over-medicating her. So just to keep in mind that when, I turned to Jim, I said, well, how about you and I helping, to trying to change things? It was like he had done so much in his own life that it was such an incredible inspiration to me that I felt like, let's use this idea, this cockamamie idea I have in the back of my head to make film and use photography to help change the world. And so we hatched this idea to start the Oceanic Preservation Society. And, keep in mind, I'd never made a film before. And now I'm on that boat with Jim, and we're all excited about this new plan. And on the boat next to us, we're down in the Caribbean, is Steven Spielberg on his rental boat, the Getty's boat. And it turns out that my kids started doing sleepovers with his kid. And so I met Steven Spielberg, and he comes over to the boat to find out who the father of his new friend is. And I said, well, I'm a still photographer. I'm thinking about getting into the film business. Do you have any recommendations? And he says, yeah, never make a movie involving boats or animals. And I'm about to go to the Cove, where everything is done with boats and animals, and except the people there that at the Cove, they want to kill you if and you get arrested if you get in there. And that was the precursor to us doing that movie. But I'll show you a little bit about what the next one is about. This is just it's about it's not quite a trailer. You can't even see over there, can you? You can? Okay, good. It's not a trailer. Some people call it a sizzle reel, but we're only about maybe 30% done with the movie. So I wanted to get something so we can get like a group like this. People always say, "What are you up to next?" Well, this is a bit of a hint.
Anthropocene means the time of humans. It's when the impact of humans is leaving itself as a mark in the fossil record of the future.
Every single continent is experiencing what they're calling the Anthropocene extinction, the man-made extinction.
Right now, scientists estimate we may be losing as many as 30,000 species every year.
With even an order of magnitude, we don't know how many species are on the planet today.
How could life be slipping through our fingers before we even get a chance to know it?
Carbon dioxide, primarily in the oceans, is intimately associated with these mass extinctions.
The burning of fossil fuels is making the oceans more acidic.
The great majority of the species that are teetering on the brink of extinction are small things.
Phytoplankton are responsible for producing half of all global oxygen.
Over the last 50 years, we may have lost as much as 40% of phytoplankton production.
When the oceans collapse, life everywhere fails.
I think it's dawning on us now that this is the big one.
We are deluding ourselves by thinking that oil is cheap.
What are the costs of over 13,000 people dying a year in the United States just from pollution from coal plants?
If you look at all the armed forces we dedicated, the bases we built, it's all directly or indirectly tied to oil.
We're financing both sides of the war.
Why do we get energy from hell when we can get it from heaven?
When you're talking about losing civilization, all of nature, it's not a spectator sport anymore. We're getting the team back together, and we're getting together some of the most technical and creative minds in the industry. We have a moral obligation to save these species because we're responsible for them blinking out. Oh, they get served. Does it say whale?
Yeah. What did she tell you this piece was? So there's 2 pieces of whale.
The owners and chef of one of America's trendiest restaurants are facing federal charges tonight. And behind the undercover sting, some movie makers fresh off that big award, who, as we said, went right back to work.
This is a regular water bottle. There's your camera, and there's your audio right under it.
I think we have a higher calling. than just destroying the planet.
Margaret Mead was asked, is it possible for any small group to change the world? And as she said, that is the only thing that has ever changed the world.
There's this tipping point with culture. We're on that edge now. It just needs a nudge. We're not trying to make a movie, we're trying to start a movement. Obama's going to let us do that to the White House, but we're going to try. Yeah, I mean, during the Academy Awards, there's like all those, that year there was like George Clooney, Meryl Streep, Jeff Bridges, all these, these great directors. They're all there, and there's these parties every night. You're seeing the same people every night. And my wife, who like every other woman in the world just loves the Academy Awards mostly to watch what people are wearing. Now she can join them. It's like, the car picks us up at the Chateau Marmont, to go to the mayor's house for a dinner with all these people. And I said, you take the car, I'm going to go to the Hump, this restaurant that we found out that was selling whale meat. And she said, just grow up, why can't you just enjoy yourself? I said, this is what I live for. And she said, well, you're going to regret it someday. And so we won the Academy Award. The next day it was on the front page of the New York Times that we busted this restaurant that was selling whale meat. And it was incredible because we're working with federal agents, and we have, if any of the restaurant owners had seen the movie, they would have seen all the characters from our movie there, Dave Rostovich, the surfer, Joe, the head of production, Simon, all these people were there that worked on the movie. But it was a seminal event because I realized that a small group of people can change the world. You don't need to have all of Congress, thank God, to make a difference. You just need a few people working together. When you make a movie, you might have a dozen people working, but then that goes off into the world, and people are still seeing the movie. Next month January. We're going to be in Daytona with a Cove car. We're going to have a Cove race car, NASCAR there. Now I'm a green guy. So to give you an idea, we have, this place is LEED certified. My studio has 120 solar panels on it. I generate 140% of my electrical needs from the roof. The electric company gives me, on the darkest month of the year, a check. If it goes anywhere from $1,000 in the summer to $100 last month, but I don't pay for electricity. I drive 2 electric cars. One goes 90 miles an hour. It goes 120 miles on a charge. And the license plate says VUS. It stands for Vehicle Using Sun. It's the opposite of an SUV. So when this race car driver says, I want to do a Cove car, and I think, oh man, it's like the energy, that's wasted. She said, but how else can you reach these kind of people? The NASCAR set is not your people. You can't be talking to the choir all the time. And so, there's like 76 million race car fans or NASCAR fans. And so we're going to have a Cove car. I should have showed a picture of it because we still need money. If anybody feels rich out there, need about $10,000 more. This is a free advertisement. So this movie came out almost 3 years ago, and it still has traction. People are still talking about it. We're still making it relevant. Empire State Building next month, NASCAR. They say when you're done making a doc, you're only halfway there. Because you think about it. You do a movie like Pirates of the Caribbean. I got to be careful here. This would be broadcast, right? Because Gore Verbinski, the director, is kind of a friend of mine. But you do a movie like that, and basically, it's about making money, right? And entertaining people, and that's a fairly high calling. I don't like to. I like to watch movies that sort of zone out and feel like, this is just entertainment. But I feel like that we're running out of time. The mass extinction that we're talking about, there's been 5 major extinctions in the history of the planet, going back to the Ordovician, 450 million years ago, the Devonian, the Permian, 90% of the creatures in the world, died, blinked out. The KT, the one that, the Cretaceous Tertiary, the one that killed the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. That was the last big one. Now we're going through one that's called the Anthropocene. The Anthropocene is it's a geologic epoch that's named after us. It means the age of man. We're at the point now where we're changing the geology, we're changing the chemistry of the oceans to the point where we may be losing half the species on the planet by the end of the century. And I guess if you're your age, that doesn't seem so it seems like forever, 90 years, but when you get to be my age, that's like, that's only twice as long as I've been living, a little bit less. And it's like, that's not a lot of time. You're talking about like if you have a grandkid, he can't see half the kids on the planet, or see half the species on the planet. We lost I know 20 years ago, the Baiji was threatened. Baiji is a Yangtze River dolphin. And I thought, well, they're going to take care of it. They certainly know that this thing is threatened. They have pens. If they could catch one, they're going to have pens to raise it. And humanity will figure out a way. It went extinct. Black rhino went extinct last month. The eastern black rhino. We're losing somewhere between 100 and 200 species a day on the planet. This is about 100 to 1,000 times more of the background rate. Extinctions are normal, so is the creation of a species, but we're losing them at a rate that we predict is about 100 to 1,000 times faster than would be normal. This is going on in our lifetime. You want to know what a mass extinction looks like? It's, I used to think it was a bolide event, like an asteroid. This is what extinction looks like. It's me going back in the room and having a Coca-Cola from, a can that was, manufactured somewhere, maybe in, another part of the country. The actual average bite of food comes from 1,500 miles away. I flew here in a plane that, spews a lot of carbon. The only way I can rationalize this, that if I can get the word out that what's going on, that it's somehow worth it. If I was making a Hollywood film, I don't know if I could rationalize it. I look at things completely differently now. When you talk about acidifying the ocean, oysters haven't been able to grow in the northwestern United States for the last 70 years now. They have to incubate the larvae outside in tanks and measure the ocean water because it's too acidic, and wait till it's less acidic so there's no upwellings. And when you talk plankton, responsible for every other breath that you take right now is not because of plants, it's because of plankton. Plankton, which is, it's oxymoronic, I know, but over half the oxygen coming from plants in the ocean, and we're losing 1% of it a year. I mean, just to do the math on that one. We're doing what no wild animal will do. We're following our own nest. And the question to me is, how do you make that entertaining? Hey, dear, let's go see the Extinction movie tonight. Yeah, I tell you what, you're not going to get a lot of dates on that one. But what the thing is, I thought The Cove would be the ultimate date movie. No, seriously. I mean, think about it. I mean, when I see a movie, I want to be moved. I know women do. They want to see an emotional movie. Guys want to see action adventure. It had all those ingredients, and people saw it not at a theater. People don't like to cry in public, so they decided to see it in DVDs, which is fine. That's where we make most of our money, on DVDs. Please buy it. But it's in the next film, we're going to make it, another eco-thriller. We'll figure out a way to make it, so it's fun and exciting and sexy and interesting. And, it's going to be about a $5 million movie. We've already raised the money for it. But now what I want to do is what I'm thinking about now, what we're doing is we're working on the campaign right now. When we got done with the Cove, we thought, well, Jesus, all these people want to know what to do. What do we tell them? And, so go sign a petition, and that was great. We had 3 million people sign petitions, which really is pretty effective. It shows a big force. But, on this issue, I don't want to look at a group and, people say, what can I do? I want them to figure out what to do themselves. People are really powerful. I mean, everybody in this room has the potential to change. Once you change yourself, you change the people around you, you change the world. Everything gets bigger, and we're able to find the money to do these things, I think, partly because that we're looking out for something bigger than us. We're not just making a movie so we can get $10. In the movie world, they call it $10 in a box of popcorn. That's how they look at us. You're $10 in a box of popcorn. I think, what a waste of humanity. Because I don't look at it butts and seats, I look at it minds and seats. I don't look at you guys and see your butts. I want to see I want to know what you're thinking. I want to see your eyes. I want to change your hearts and your heads. And that's, you know, it's such a powerful medium, and to abuse it, you know, for just entertainment seems to be a shame. When we were at the Academy Awards, it's funny because everybody's like, there's a banquet where the week before they're going to give you the rules, like you can't talk too long, and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And everybody's standing there, you know, waiting to go into to get the seating. And this guy pokes his head up in between my wife and I and says, you know, I just want to tell you, great job on the film. And you know, I try to do the same thing in Darfur, you know, shine a bright light on a subject. And I said, oh, we modeled our movie after yours, Ocean's 11. And he says, oh, it's much better than that. And I said, why do you say that? He said, because it's real. My wife, you know, turns to me after he leaves and said, who was that? And I said, that was George Clooney. I said, didn't look like him. It's like, maybe she met him at the mayor's office or the mayor's house that time. But I think it's such a powerful medium, I have so much hope that we can do so much more with it, because it's really in its infancy, you know, sort of movie activism. You know, you see like Inside Job won the Academy Award last year. I don't know if that changed anybody's mind, that now that we know who the people are that took advantage of us, you know, has anything really changed? Yeah, I don't know. You know, Gasland certainly opened up our eyes about fracking. You know, but I'm not sure what Avatar did. You know, Avatar was an environmental film. No, it was. It was. At the DGA, the Directors Guild Association, I was always terrified of, you know, you had to do a lot of public speaking when you're up for a potential award. And, you know, I don't know how other people do it, but I was like, you know, I'd be at a table and, you know, my wife was enjoying herself with everybody else. And I'm just thinking, what am I going to say if I get up there? You know, if we win. I was hoping we wouldn't win, so I wouldn't have to say anything. And I remember, like, I think, you know, I was frozen because there were all these directors out there, and then, you know, they called, you know, my name when the Cove won for Best Director, and I saw James Cameron sitting there, and I just thought, well, you know, I said it just sort of extemporaneously. I wasn't thinking about it, but I said, you know what, the Cove is like a prequel to Avatar. It's, you know, the ex-military guy goes in to subjugate the natives, who are 9 feet long and blue, finds out they're more intelligent, sentient than he realizes, and he creates an army to vanquish its own species. They said, except the Cove is real, and it's happening right now. It's in the present. And, and it's true. It's like, you know, that movie did $3 billion worth of business. We did just about $1 million. But you know, Cameron told me afterwards. He says, you know, you can't. You know, he said Cove is a much better activism movie. But he said he made the Avatar with the point of trying to get people to make a conservation-based movie, but make it so people could feel. You know, but it wasn't. It was emotional, but it wasn't real enough to change people. They didn't make the connection between the Amazon and what was going on in what was the world called? Anyway, it's Pandora. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, brilliant movie, but the question is, how do you know, make a movie that's going to be entertaining, have it, you know, people go see it, and then have people get changed afterwards. But that's what we're going to do with the next film. And I hope you all see it. Because we were calling it, the working title of it was called The Singing Planet. And the reason it was called that was because just about everything's been singing. We just haven't been listening. You know, everything that has a backbone also has a voice. You know, even fish talk. You know, almost all whales sing. Birds sing, insects sing. And we start to put microphones on them. Just about everything out there is communicating. We just haven't been listening. And I thought that's the way in emotionally, is to give these animals a voice. Wish I would have brought some of the recordings, but you know, you hear some of these recordings of things like a seal. You think a seal is like, you know, barks like a dog. You know, if you see it at SeaWorld, they treat it like a dog. But you put a microphone underwater, a hydrophone underwater, and it makes the most incredible, beautiful sounds you couldn't imagine. It sounds like something was made on a synthesizer with a computer. And they can sit under these underwater ledges up in the Arctic and sing for an hour. That's how they call for mates in, you know, April or May of every year. And you would never know that unless you were a scientist researcher. Chris Clark, who directs the Cornell Bioacoustical Laboratory up in Cornell, he's the guy that told me that, you know, everything's singing, we just haven't been listening. He said he was up there doing a bowhead study, and he thought, well, you can't see bowheads, especially on a rough day, because the blowhole, the wind blows and you can't see them arc. They're only up for a second and they're down for 20 minutes. And he was out there thinking, well, the way I could do an assessment is I'll put some hydrophones over the side and I'll go out in the ocean and listen to see if I can tell how many there are. And he gets the only boat he can, which is an Eskimo's boat, an Inuit's boat with a sealskin canoe, and he puts these headphones these hydrophones over the side, and he has his headphones, and he listens to it. He goes and he hears a bearded seal. He said, "This is the most extraordinary thing I've ever heard." And he says to the Inuit, he says, he puts the headphones on. He says, "Have you ever heard anything like that in your life before?" And the Inuit goes, "Bearded seal." And he goes, "How do you know that?" And the Inuit puts his paddle in the water and he puts it in his jawbone, and he says, "That's how we listen for him when we hunt him." Anyway, did you want to do a Q&A? Was somebody going to, this is Nikolai?
We do have time for some questions.
Okay.
If you raise your hand, we'll get a microphone to you. Yes, ma'am. Right there.
Thank you so much for coming here.
Thanks for coming yourself.
Are you a vegetarian?
Yes. 1986, I did a story for Fortune magazine on the biggest independently cattle ranches in America, biggest independently owned ones. And I pushed cattle, I worked with cattle, I lived with cattle for 3 months, and the last thing I did is I went to a slaughterhouse. And if anybody has ever been to a slaughterhouse before, raise their hands. One. I'm just curious, out of the 5 or 6 people that raised their hands, do you still eat meat, or do you still think about that day? You still eat it? Primarily fish. Oh, I can tell several good stories based on just what we talked about here. So I became a pescatarian that day. I stopped eating things that walked. I never did that again. 1986. So I was a pescatarian, not a vegetarian, really. And about when I was making the Cove, it would have been about 2006. I went to a hospital near Minamata, where they had if you saw the movie, this is where they had the biggest industrial outbreak of pollution that there was up until that point. And mercury got put into this waterway and killed hundreds of people, infected hundreds of thousands of people more. And I was going to interview the doctors who are in our film. And so I interviewed the doctors in the morning, 6 doctors, researchers, and scientists, and I invited them to sushi. And I told because sushi is really expensive in Japan, even though that's all they eat is fish. Sushi is really expensive. And so I told my interpreter, get the good stuff, because they're not going to order it themselves. They'll be too embarrassed. And halfway through the meal, I looked down at the end with the researchers, and none of them are eating the fish, not one of them. And I said, well, what's with this? Japanese people eat more fish than anybody on the planet, 66 kilos per person a year. They're eating their weight in fish. And I was really proud of the way my diet, because it's like Japanese, I thought it's the one thing we had in common, was the diet. And they said, oh, the lead doctor, Dr. Kino said, well, you should know that the 6 of us around this table were curious of how fast mercury bioaccumulates in the human body. So they did this experiment. They called it the Super Size Me experiment, but Japanese style. They each ate 200 grams of tuna every day. 200 grams of tuna is less than half a pan of tuna. It's half a can of tuna. It's like what I would put on a couple crackers. And they were getting the cheapest. They were paying for the experiment themselves because the government didn't want to know the results of it, and the hospital didn't want to pay for it. So they paid for it themselves. So they were buying the cheapest cuts of tuna they could, a bonito, a very small, short-lived tuna. And they would measure the mercury in their blood after the end of each week. And at the end of 2 weeks, their levels had doubled. And 6 of them doing it, one of the doctors drops out because he can see where this is going, and the other 5 get together and say, well, we should, let's spring for the good stuff. There's something must be wrong with bonito. Let's change our diet a little bit. We'll get, the sushi grade tuna. And they did, their average level went up 8 times. And he said, you should know that none of us here, none of the people at the hospital, none of the workers, from the people that scrub the floors to the researchers, eat fish anymore. Do you eat a lot? And I said, that's all I eat for animal protein. And he said, well, you should get your levels looked at when you get home. And I did. I had the highest level my doctor had ever seen in Colorado. It was 44 parts per million. High is 1. And now what's worse is my son is a fisherman, a professional fisherman. And I taught him how to fish. He went way beyond me, but his levels were even higher than mine. So I haven't, I've been a real vegetarian for, the last, since 2006. But so the big issue is like if you're a woman that's about within 2 years to become pregnant, or if you're a child, you shouldn't be eating tuna fish at a very high rate at all. I would recommend not eating it at all because it's poison to me. I mean, I can't eat any of it because one thing that would happen at Dr. Aquino's office is I saw brain slices of what happens to the human brain on Mercury. And it's like the brain has all these convolutions that are like little, looks like fjords. And these, actually dolphins have more of these than us. Convolutions are related to intelligence that we think. But, dolphins, by that age, dolphins are a lot more intelligent because they have bigger brain mass in general, and they have more convolutions of the gray matter. But the gray matter gets eaten out. It looks like Swiss cheese. So that's your brain on fish, on Mercury. Yeah, that was just one question. We have time for one half more question.
I would also like to say thank you for coming. And you said you were 30% into the film. Is that production or post-production? And then also, what do you think is the single largest driving force going into the extinction right now?
Well, I'll start with the last question first. There's four major drivers of extinction. Habitat destruction is the worst. We have 7 billion people now, soon to be 9 in the next decade or so. It requires a lot of land for all these people. So habitat destruction is number one. Pollution, invasive species, and overconsumption. There's too many of us. We're no longer at the point where we can sustain ourselves with wildlife, right? There's not a wildlife to eat it, but we think of wildlife in the ocean as seafood, right? And that's where we've lost over 90% of the tuna. Most of the big fish are gone. If you look at what we do historically as human beings, is we work our way through the fish stocks. We did it with whaling stocks, we did it with fish stocks. And by the way, there's another analogy that, when I started researching all this, you look at, whales just about went extinct in the mid-1800s because whaling was the source of oil for keeping the lights on. And what saved whales was the discovery of oil. And now what's destroying them again is the discovery of oil. But it's all been about energy. Slavery was about energy. It's about cheap energy. And there's cheap energy. I live in Boulder, Colorado. We have 300 days of sunshine a year. I get checks from the electric company, and so we don't have an energy shortage. We have an imagination shortage, and that's the big problem. We're at the studio. We're solar powered, wind powered. At my home, we're completely solar powered, and if I can do it, and I'm not that smart of a guy. I mean, to think of the kids in this room, think of the next generation coming out. There's a lot of energy sources, or light bulbs that are 100 times, 1,000 times more efficient than what we have right now. Those are coming down the pike. We just need to embrace this technology and start to realize that there's a consequence of this cheap energy. If you notice all the voices that we have in there, they're not from the far left. We have General Wesley Clark, we have Rear Admiral McGuinn, we have the people from the religious right. So we're consciously making the next film. So the chorus is on the traditional right. Military leaders talking about the need to get off of foreign oil. We have Republicans talking about the need to get off of it because we have a lot of common ground. Enough common ground to solve the issue. We just have to focus on that instead of focusing on the differences. Focusing on what we have in common. We're all human beings. We all love to breathe, right? Feels good. You don't want to have half your oxygen gone in the next 100 years. So we want to fix the economy. Well, why are we exporting $1 billion a day for foreign oil? That doesn't make any sense at all. Exporting $1 billion of our money to get foreign oil in this country. We borrow money from China to pay unfriendly countries in the Middle East so we can bring it back here and pollute the planet. And nothing about that triangle really works, on an economic point, on a health point of view, a national security point of view. And it's just a matter of us getting together and trying to figure out common ground, I think. Did I answer one question?
Production. How far along in production is the 30%?
What's that?
The production. 30% is post-production.
Oh yeah,
filming.
we're about 30% of production. Yeah. It took us about 4 years to make the Cove. This one we're about 2 years in right now. I was actually at Sundance, and I was reading in 2009, I guess it was, and I was reading 2 books. One was called Terra by Michael Novacek, who is the provost of the American Museum of Natural History. He's the guy in this film here, this little short that says, how can we let life slip through our fingers before we even know it's here? I was on a dinosaur expedition with him in the Gobi for National Geographic. I was reading his book called Terra, and in that book he was talking about the 6th extinction. I thought, my God, this is depressing. I picked up the other book I was reading, the second of the 2 books I brought with me. The other one was called Reef and Time by Charles Verone, and he's the guy that says in the film that, I thought it was a read about the Great Barrier Reef, but he's also talking about the 6th major extinction. And I thought, this is huge. I mean, and it's not like we don't know about it. It's like, I was in Germany with this film a couple years ago, and it was in the Financial Times, like on page 6, there's all this financial news, and then there's a little article on page 6 about this big, and it said, half the headline was something like, half the species on the planet faced with extinction. It's like, the irony to me of like, that's how important it was, without plankton, there is no economy. Without plankton, there is no Lady Gaga. Without plankton, we don't have a school here. Without plankton, it doesn't matter what we do. So, to me, it's like, I want, the joke is in the conservation community is that we're always concentrating on the big, charismatic megafauna, whales, dolphins, lions, tigers, bears, because we can sort of, we put our emotions on them. It's hard to get, all cute and cuddly about plankton, because it's something that resides in your brain. But, what we need to do, what I need to try to do is draw the line to try to make the connections that, without these small things, the big things go. Everything you care about, so it means, that's what we're trying to do, is try to make this sort of very emotional movie. That's why we're concentrating on the songs of these animals. Chris was playing me a tape of a bird called the Oo. This bird was all over the Hawaiian Islands, not so long ago, like 60 years ago. It was cultivated for its feathers, its beautiful feathers, for ceremonial cloaks, and then there's a lot of invasive species. Most of the birds in the Hawaiian Islands are actually not indigenous. They're brought in or from the outside. But this Oo had a beautiful song, and it actually is one of the few songbirds that do duets. It plays it sings a song, and then the female will answer. And they went, well, I won't tell you the story. About 50 years ago, the researcher went in there to try to find if there's any Oo, so he played a duet. And a male came by and sang his half of the duet, and they've never seen another one since. But they played this recording of this Oo singing, the last male of a species, singing for a female that will never come. I mean, doesn't that choke you up? I mean, Jesus. I mean, because it's almost like a science fiction nightmare if you were thinking about you being the last person in the world in Little Rock, going down the streets, singing for, anybody out there, and to hear this one bird singing for its mate. I mean, I think that's the most, heartbreaking thing I've ever heard. And then, the Yangtze River dolphin, which went extinct, I don't know, who knows when it went extinct. They saw the last one probably 10, 15 years ago. Douglas Adams, the guy that wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, one of his last books was called Last Chance to See. And so he went to the Yangtze, and he didn't have hydrophones, so he took a regular microphone and put a condom on it and put it in the water, so he could hear it, right? You don't want to lose his microphones. But he said, remember, these animals are sonic creatures. They live in a world of sound, and there were so many boats going by that he was listening. They put him in, so he thought, well, maybe we could hear the Baiji if one goes by. All they could hear was boat noises, because there's tens of thousands of boats, and these animals are nearly blind, and so they were faced with, you're talking about what causes extinction. There the Yangtze River dolphin got hit by all four. Habitat destruction, all the pollution, the fishermen put these grappling hooks that would just, go from one side to the other, that just roll around, and then the baishi would get snagged on it. And then, of course, they get one, they don't throw it away, they eat it. So, the first things to go are the things that are, in these small habitats, these sort of micro-habitats, but then the bigger things start to fail. Look at what's going on in Africa. Most of the African animals live in game parks. They're not like wild, free-ranging animals anymore. They're sort of like big Disneylands.
Okay, we have time for one more.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you so much. I was just wanting to know if you had ever come across Victor Kulvinskis and the raw foods and sprouted grains revolution that he advocated, because as a way to de-acidify the body, which he says is a reflection of the acidification of the ocean, and it has to do with overconsumption of all kinds of cooked. And have you ever come across Victor Kulvinskis?
No, I haven't, but I do eat raw food. And I was just in LA, I was eating at, I forget what it's called, it's a restaurant down on like 5th and Santa Monica, right around in that area. But I mean, raw food, vegetarian food is great. I mean, when I was first getting into being a vegan, I was asking this vegan friend of mine, well, what do you eat? And she goes, everything else. It's like, you don't have to eat animals. There's a million other things that are healthy for you. And you look at, I just saw a film 2 nights ago that I have a producer credit on it, but producer to me, I just raised money for it. But the guy, there's a sequence in it where it just shows like, what happens to the arteries. It shows a doctor squeezing out the fat of an artery, and it's just like, I mean, if you ever worked at if you ever milked cows, the worst thing to do is to try to clean the machinery after you've done that. It's so gunky. I don't drink milk anymore with my coffee. I drink almond milk or soy milk, but like my wife still likes milk, so you steam it. It takes like, 2 minutes to clean the little steamer after the milk. I do it with my almond milk, and I just wipe it down with a dry rag. I'm have to take sandpaper to the thing that my wife uses it. I did one book called Hunting Dinosaurs back in 1994. It was a bestseller. But it's about my experiences on the with paleontology. We used about 50 paleontologists as tour guides through the Mesozoic to sort of walk you through, their vision of what the world looked like, to anywhere from 230 million years ago to 65 million years ago. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for coming. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure. Thank you.